Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining me on my newest town hall. Happy Monday morning on day, I don't even know what, of quarantine. These days tend to run together at this point. But today we're going to talk about what our legislature is doing for us during the coronavirus crisis. And I am so honored to have State Representative Mary Jo Daley on as my special guest today. She represents the 148th District, which is Montgomery County, and she has been a state representative since 2013. Thank you, Mary Jo. I appreciate you joining me.
It's good to be with you, Patty.
Well, today, like I said, we're going to talk about how you all in Harrisburg are helping us while we're sitting here at home doing our part to help stop the coronavirus. And I think a good place to start would just be to ask what the legislature has done to help us in PA so far to help curb this coronavirus.
Quite honestly, the governor has really taken the lead on a lot of what Pennsylvania has done. But the legislature did meet on March 23rd, 24th, and 25th. And one of the things that we did was make it possible that we would allow for remote voting by the legislature. So normally you have to be in Harrisburg, in the Capitol, in order to vote. And with the stay-at-home orders in some of the counties at that time, we made it possible to do remote voting. So we can talk about that later. But that actually enabled us to do some things. So there were some bills passed over those 3 days, and one of the important changes was, or the important bills addressed some of the issues that our school districts were running into, the 180 days of attendance and the testing that would not be done this year. And the schools still don't know exactly when or if they'll be able to open the rest of the year. So we were getting a lot of emails that request from interested parties to get these laws passed, and we were able to do that, and the governor signed that into law. One of the other things that we did, which I think will prove to be really important, is that we changed the date of the primary from April 28th to June 2nd, and with hope that by June 2nd we would be in a better situation, having more information about COVID-19 and not having the immediacy of having it in April 28th. The counties that our elections are run by the counties, and so the counties were really very interested in having the date changed because so many polling places are in senior citizen residences or senior citizen, senior centers, and also in schools, that it was really going to be very difficult for the counties to find places to vote. We also gave them the ability to consolidate polling places, and I think that will help also. And the mail-in voting that we approved back in 2019 will, I think, prove to be very, very helpful with our elections this year. There's so much that we don't know about the novel coronavirus and COVID-19 that it's going to make it really difficult. And I think that so many people are wary of being exposed to the virus that they can avoid if they apply for a mail-in ballot. And I know that Montgomery County is really pushing that people make applications for the mail-in ballot. And I can tell you that, votespa.com is where you go to do your application. And it's a really relatively simple process. It asks a few questions to determine if you should be getting an absentee ballot or the new mail-in ballot. In the long run, they're very similar, but the law says that if you can get an absentee ballot, you should. So answering those questions allows the system to know which kind to get for you. I would recommend having a driver's license or your identification close by, because you want to make sure that your name that you're putting for on your application for the mail-in ballot is exactly the same as what you would be putting as what's on your identification. And then you submit it and the county is able to process it. I got an email from my county about, I think, 2 weeks after I did the application, telling me that my application had been approved by the county and they would send me the mail-in ballot as soon as they are available. And so that was exciting. But another question, the email came from, it looked like one of those fake emails, I hate to say, but it was a bunch of uppercase letters, but the subject line did say Montgomery County Voter Services. So I was okay to open it. I kind of wish they had done something differently, but if you see an email like that a couple of weeks after you apply for your mail-in ballot, make sure that you take your time before trashing it. Although you do get an email immediately after you fill out the application for the mail-in ballot that tells you that it's been submitted, and it assigns you a number. You have a number, to go by. So that, I think, will prove to be really a big help for the June 2nd primary election. And let's see. I think those were the really important things that we did so far. We are in session today and tomorrow, and I can't tell you exactly what's on the agenda. I could tell you that probably this afternoon after our caucus meeting, because it appears that bills are being used that have already gone through committees, and so they'll be amended. And so it's hard to tell without getting all the details exactly what we're going to be doing right in the next few days.
Yeah, I'm surprised that and impressed and thankful that you all are still working. I mean, it's awesome that you found a way around the quarantine to be able to do that.
I actually think it's amazing because we're one of the few states that has done it. And, the 356 podcast or whatever they do, they did an article I saw, I could email it to you, but it was a really good article about Pennsylvania having remote voting. And it went through the whole process of how we actually do it, how we meet. And it was pretty interesting. And they interviewed Tara Toohill, a Republican legislator, and Melissa Schusterman, a Democratic legislator. And it was interesting to read somebody writing this article about something we had done in Pennsylvania. And it was really very, very positive. I even attended a webcast, a webinar on voting remotely. And it was interesting because they were talking about using Zoom. We're not doing anything. We're using a Microsoft product called Teams to do our caucus, and it's very similar to Zoom, where you get everybody can have either a still picture of themselves or a live picture of themselves. But we had, I think, 100 people on our caucus.
Wow.
A team meeting, and they were only supposed to use the chat function if we have a question or a comment. And so it's kept it very orderly, and the caucus chair runs it and lets us know when it's going to be our turn, or what the order of questions and comments are. So I'm in the Democratic caucus. It's worked really well for us, I think.
Yeah.
And they're going to make it available to our staff now in our district offices, because that's another area that's been pretty busy, because we're not actually working in the district offices, but we are, a lot of our staff is working. We cannot require them to work, they're all on a leave. But I have 3 people who work in my district office, and they are all working remotely, and we check in with each other every day. So it's interesting.
It's always nice when you can get some press that praises you for doing a good job for once, I'm sure.
It was actually really very exciting. My campaign treasurer sent it to me, and I was like, oh.
It's like you're in the twilight zone. You're
Yeah,
working from home. The
yes,
legislature's getting good press. What's going on here?
yeah, exactly.
Well, while we're on the subject of your regional office, what kind of things are you seeing and hearing from constituents? Like what do you find is the most pressing question they have or need that they have?
Um, Seniors are interested in the property tax and rent rebate program, and how they can get those applications in. And it turns out that the applications aren't being processed right now. And so our district office typically helps a lot of folks, to fill out the application form. Some people fill it out themselves or have their accountant do it. We have a lot of folks who come into the district office for help with that. The deadline for that's extended to the end of the year. So we are not working on that right now because we're not having any one-on-one personal interactions. And we are assuring seniors and people who are eligible for that rebate that we will be there, and we will get, we don't know how long this is going to last, but we have to continue to be adaptive to whatever happens in the future. But we are assuring them that we will help them at the right time. But it's not right now. So
Yeah.
we've gotten those calls. We've also gotten calls from people having trouble applying for unemployment because I know the system was really overloaded with a huge number of applicants over the past few weeks. But they have been able, the Labor and Industry Department has provided them with information that they can then pass on. They can cut and paste it into an email back to a person to let them know, what the current situation is. And got a call from a single mom who has a job in an essential service, but she hasn't been able to get the daycare worked out for her child so that she can go to work. So we're working through that with her. It's a little complicated because it involves 2 counties in terms of the child care. So we're trying to work with Philadelphia and figure out how to get that to work for her, because she really wants to be able to go to work.
Yeah.
But obviously her kids are still young enough that they need daycare, and so we're working on that. We had a guy who owns a restaurant and bar who is keeping some of his employees working by doing curbside pickup. So
Yeah.
people will be placing the orders, and then they'd get the orders out to the curbside. And they were a little concerned because they had a visit from somebody from the enforcement end of the liquor control business. And they thought that they were a little rough in the way that they were handling them, and kind of not expressing like, hey, it's great that you're able to keep some folks at work.
Right.
That's really a good thing. Just make sure you're following the rules. And so we actually got some help with some phone calls with that, to just let people know that you don't have to be so aggressive. So
Yeah.
because these folks are, they're trying to stay in business and do business that they can and help people get meals. So that was an interesting one.
And it's new for everybody, right? We're all trying to figure this out. I mean, it's not like they're deliberately trying to do something wrong. But I don't think we've ever lived through something like this where the whole state has been forced to stay home for such a long period of time. And it'd be nice if people could remember that. Even the people calling like for unemployment, those poor people answering the phones, like I just can't even imagine all day, every day. And, they're doing their best. And the system wasn't set up to handle this many people at once. So
You're
yeah,
right.
I think,
Oh, one other thing
yeah,
that I learned in related to the liquor, that, they did open up this new online purchase for
yes,
the wine and spirit stores. And they got, again, it's a new system. It's got a much bigger demand, and that caused the system to crash. And I was assured that they are continuing to work on it and will continue to work on it. So please be patient, because that's another system that was overwhelmed. But certainly they're doing their best to be able to provide that service. So, but you're right. You're absolutely right about, I have to keep telling myself, none of us have ever dealt with anything like this before.
no. And to circle back, I have a question about the primary. So I've been getting two questions kind of over and over again and maybe it's too early for you to even know the answer to this, but is there a chance that they would postpone the primary past June 2nd if things don't turn around? And the other one is there an opportunity or an option for them to just send everybody a mail-in ballot instead of holding a live primary? Those are the two things I've been hearing a lot about.
So let's talk about the second one first, about everyone getting a mail-in ballot. That idea was put forward and rejected by the majority in Harrisburg, and so that won't be happening. I've heard that there's an initiative in the U.S. Congress to make money available that everyone could have a mail-in ballot mailed to them.
Right.
And, it's all about money. So I think that would be great. But, some of the states have already had their primaries.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that we all still have to focus, and this is, because I don't think that everybody's going to get the mail-in ballot mailed to them. And it's tricky because it's really hard. How do you reach out to everyone?
Right.
Because some of the people, everybody doesn't have a computer. Everybody isn't going to be able to tune into your Zoom or even to Facebook Live. And,
right.
Like making calls to people is really difficult. And I'm doing a campaign mailer to just let people know how to do mail-in voting.
Yeah.
But that's expensive to do also, and it's going to go to people who voted in the 3 of the last 4 elections, because that was something we could afford to do, but it still isn't going to reach everybody. So I think that word of mouth, using every different kind of way that you can think of to help people know that.
Yeah.
And as far as postponing it, as they do these stay-at-home initiatives, that the governor now has the entire state under stay-at-home orders, that whole initiative is like all about flattening the curve so that it spreads out the incidence of people getting the virus, so that the hospitals and the health systems aren't over, there's not so much demand that they can't answer them. And with the shortage of PPE and ventilators, I think that's even a bigger concern. So, but I was also heard something on the radio this morning about that there was a large number of people who have now recovered from COVID-19. And if they can figure out how to get those people, and if they have immunity, back to work, I feel like the next few months are all about following the stay-at-home orders, wearing the masks,
mm-hmm.
and really doing all of that to flatten the curve, because we're not flattening it yet in Pennsylvania.
Right.
That is all stuff that we can do as individuals, and, we'll see, but again, moving the date, that's something that I think it's just too early
Yeah.
to know how that's going to go. But, anything's possible in this world.
Yeah, I mean, it is, I guess once you've been at home for so long, it feels like it should be July by now, and it's only April 6th. So I guess that is a good point. That we just hang on. June is a long way away. So yeah.
And I've been under stay at home longer than you guys have. So I'll tell you, I learned how to play gin rummy, and I'm cooking more. And I feel really lucky that my husband and I get along really well. And so we're managing to not get on each other's nerves too much. But it happens because it happens.
Yes, I heard on the news that this is either going to be a boom in divorces or a boom in babies. So we'll see how that works out. Hopefully.
Well, I'm past baby age, but and I think we're on a good track to not have to deal with the divorce thing.
Good. I'm glad to hear it.
I am too. I'm glad to say it.
So what, you say that you're, obviously you're working from home and you're doing the Skype for Business and that sort of thing. How are you remotely voting? Are you doing that sort of like how we're doing it now over a platform like this, or you have to call it in? How does that work for you?
So they're working it through the whip system, and each of the whips have a number of deputy whips, and the deputy whips, I think that my deputy whip is Tina Davis, who you know.
Yes.
And I think that Tina has 7 or 8 members on her whip list. And so we do the caucus using the Teams application, and then the floor votes are taken place on the floor. And the way that it's been working is that the deputy whips collect the votes, how each of us want to vote. And then I know on the Democratic side, they're putting them into some kind of an application. I don't know if it's a spreadsheet or what it is, but then that information goes to a staff member from the chief clerk's office, and they actually are pushing the buttons.
Oh.
This is how I'm pretty sure that it's working.
Okay.
They're actually pushing the buttons for each of us. And you can watch this actually on live as they're doing it. You can't actually see the boards, but you can see that the speaker is then asking the deputy whips if the numbers on the boards or if the votes as reflected on the boards are correct.
Mm-hmm.
And then they respond that they are, and then the vote is finalized. Wow. So it's, you know what, in some ways that's a little clunky, but in other ways, oh my gosh, it works.
Yeah.
So we have an opportunity in caucus to get the information about the bills, have a conversation about the pros and cons, ask questions and get them answered. And all of that is done remotely, and nobody really has to go to the floor because the deputy whips are collecting your votes and then passing that information on. And it takes a little bit longer, but it still is getting the job done, and the votes are then recorded in the same way so that the public can look at how people voted on each of the bills or amendments, and it preserves a lot of the way we already do things. So we have something called, this is what we have a form called a designation. I don't know if that's going to show up right. I think it's backwards.
Yeah. No, it does. Yeah.
Does it? So I see it wrong. Designation of authority to cast votes, and we fill that out, and we designate who we want to cast the vote, and then it would be the minority whip in my case, and because all of it goes through the whip, and then it has the date of when it starts, and then I put on the expiration date the first voting meeting after the expiration of the temporary rule established by House Resolution 834. And I had to sign it and date it. And then the chief clerk and our whip have copies of this. And so when I asked them today, I just wanted to be sure that that was going to work for all those dates. And I got a email right back from our whip, Jordan Harris, saying, yep, you're good to go. So I don't have to do that any longer. We also have, for our committees work, we have another form that we fill out that it's a committee designation. That's a little bit, I haven't had any of my committees actually have meetings yet. And so that's going to be a little bit more interesting, which is why I think they're using bills that have already gone through committee.
Right.
And because they've already, that has pros and cons, but it has made it work right now, because not all of those bills that have gone through committees were voted on unanimously.
Sure.
So we may be unhappy about some of it, but I think that there's, how they talk about compromise and they talk about not letting perfection get in the way of progress. I think that's where we are right now.
Yeah. And I think you've done a great job in figuring it out in such a short time too. Again, I doubt, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think this was in place prior to the stay-at-home orders, right? This is something new that you all developed.
Absolutely. And I know that I made a real fuss about this, because I think the first 2 people that were diagnosed with COVID-19 lived in my district, about a mile from where I live. And I got a call from the governor's office telling me about this, but they didn't provide detailed information, because the state is not allowed to provide detailed information about individual people's health care. So they couldn't do more. The county apparently does not have that same restriction. And I got a call from our county commissioner, and she informed me not the names of the people, but that where they lived, and that they had been traveling in Egypt and had shopped in the same supermarkets that my husband and I shop in. And
oh no!
I have to say that was alarming, because of the fact that asymptomatic people may have the virus and could be contagious. It really made it very real to me. And so I've been trying to stay away and stay at home for longer even than the governor's report. So when I realized that we were going to still be meeting in March, I communicated to my leadership and the speaker that I had very deep concerns, because the social distancing was not going to be possible on the floor. And I did not have a plan. I just made it very clear that it was going to make it really difficult for me to go under those circumstances.
Sure.
I mean, I am a senior citizen, and while I don't have underlying conditions, it really concerned me. And when you get elected, you want to do your job.
Yep.
And you want to be where you can be. And it just seemed like with technology, we ought to be able to figure out a better way. And so it's interesting mix because we have, on the caucus side, we have, and for the caucus meetings, we have technology, and on the floor, the voting for the actual bills, it's kind of, like I said, clunky, but it works. And I'm so grateful that our leadership really saw that it was important, because we have a lot of members who are immunocompromised, and we have members who are seniors, and to put 203 of us in the room was a scary thought.
Absolutely. And I'm like you. I'm thankful that they decided against having you all come in, and that they found a way for you to do it from home. Because I think it would have been easy for everybody, and understandable to a certain extent, for everybody to say, hey, it's not safe for us to come in. Everything's got to be put on hold. But for you all to have found a way to continue to work and do, what we elected you to do, I'm very appreciative of that. And I think it says a lot about you, about everybody's commitment to their job, which I'm happy to see.
And you're absolutely right. I mean, one of the things that I know and may have learned as a member of the House of Representatives, I may not agree with everyone about, and some people I don't agree with everything, excepting I agree that all of us really have a commitment to do the job.
Yeah.
And represent the people that we're elected to represent. And I feel grateful for that every day that I serve, because I have faith that that's what drives people to do it, because it's not the easiest job, and you don't always get what you want, and but it's important.
Yeah.
It's important.
It absolutely is.
So and thank you for saying what you just said.
Oh no, I mean it. I do. So with that in mind, obviously, that leads me to another question I have is, what is everybody working on to kind of help recovery efforts once the crisis is over? Because as we know, everything's kind of on hold. Is there anything that you know of that's kind of in the works, or being even just discussed on a preliminary basis?
Well, again, it's difficult having discussions in a general way. I'm a member of the Southeast delegation, and we had a conference call with members of PASNAP, the nurses union, and so they were talking about the difficulty of getting PPE and how difficult it is for them to do their jobs, and worrying about that. So we're in the process of reaching out to the Hospital Association of Pennsylvania and to the other, to the hospitals themselves, to see if there's ways that we can help. But unfortunately, as you read more about the PPE, it's a problem that's across the country.
Yeah.
And so sometimes I think listening to people is one of the ways that we help the most. There's a few things that I know I'm looking into to find out if, like, for instance, there's a Senate bill related to childcare that does not have a companion bill that the person who wrote to me knew about. So I've asked my staff to check with LPRO to find out if anybody in the House has put forward a companion bill. And so we could do that, and that would be potentially helpful, because sometimes it helps to have a bill in both chambers. Sure. So that it can get attention from both, and then whichever one ends up being the final one.
Yeah.
I don't think people would care about that. Some of the members of the Finance Committee on the minority side have been chatting about getting together a call so that we can start to talk about after the, after this COVID virus, when it steps back from being a disaster and we get things under control more, because Pennsylvania has a lot of challenges, fiscal and financial challenges, because we had just started a rainy day fund in the past couple of years, and I think it has about $343 million in it, which in terms of a state budget, that's about 1% of our state budget. When you look at other states that have had rainy day funds, that's not a significant amount.
Right.
And so, we've started to, like, at least we're talking about, like, let's start to get together to actually really discuss what are going to be some of our next steps, what are going to be the challenges in front of us, because we're not well prepared for something like this to happen. And like the concern is that you don't know how long it's going to take to develop a vaccine,
Right.
which means that this is still more dangerous than the flu, because the flu vaccines may not be perfect, but they help.
Yeah.
And so, we have to get to that point. So I think that, you go from a period when you're trying to help the immediate needs and figure out what they are. And then as you move forward, then you can start to say, okay, what do we have to be looking out for? And I think those discussions are really in a preliminary stage right now, in terms of at least what people I've been talking to. And so I would imagine that over the next few weeks, we'll begin to have those conversations, and potentially meet with our committees. And we'll probably do it, maybe it's not the best way to do it, but we'll probably do it with our own party initially, and then go to, having meetings with, bipartisan meetings. And bipartisan meetings, I think, are always happening in terms of the budget, because we still have that to face.
Yeah.
And that's going to be a big deal, and it'll be interesting to see. We may be in a situation where we are passing a bare bones budget that just deals with where we are now, but I've already seen requests coming in for additional funds, and there's areas where I feel like we need additional funds, but it's
yeah, it's going to be complicated. Yeah, because obviously with no one out shopping and buying things, the sales tax revenue is down. With all the tax deadlines being pushed to July, your first 2-quarter revenues are down. So, I mean, it's going to be really tricky for you all to put a budget together, just based on that alone. So, and of course, a crisis like this kind of lays bare where we lack, with everybody, all the kids having to do schoolwork at home, not everybody has internet access. People are living paycheck to paycheck because they're not making a living wage. And so it's a domino effect when you have something like this rear its ugly head. It just kind of shows you all the glaring areas, that we need help with, across the state and across the country. It's the same way in all the other states too. So it's definitely going to be a lot of heavy lifting on your shoulders for sure.
Absolutely. It's frightening, and I think that it's going to take, in some ways, courage to face, the downside of this, like what could we have done, and not in a way to go backwards, and place blame, but in a way to say, okay, where do we go? What are our next steps? Because you can't change the past,
right?
But you can plan better for the future. And we know things now that, we know things, and we still don't know so much.
Yeah.
But I think you're right that it's going to be a huge challenge, and we're going to have to look at a lot of things that are going to be difficult, because you know, like we're not going to be collecting potentially. If anybody wants to send in their income tax early, I mean, that could potentially help, but that would have to be done in large numbers.
Sure.
Those revenues won't be counted until the next fiscal year. And then with all these people not working, the next fiscal year's revenues won't be looking that good. And I mean, we were actually doing really well.
Yeah.
Revenue wise up until this point.
Yeah, like you said, depositing into the rainy day fund for the first time in a long time. And yeah, it's, but, you know, sadly, this is probably not going to be the last crisis that Pennsylvania has to deal with. So it's good to hear you say that, you know, everybody's looking towards the future and not placing blame. And I hope really that the ugliness of the bipartisan politics that we find, you know, the country in and our state in, I really hope that this type of crisis can kind of put that behind us and we can get together and start working as one team instead of two.
I agree. And, you know, that's a great lead into why people should complete their census form.
Yes. Yeah.
Because it makes me sense, you know, like when I think about some of the partisanship, it makes me think about redistricting, and that makes me think about the census. And so that was another thing. I know I filled out my forms and got them in, and, you know, like it's one of those things that didn't take too long to do it. And it felt good to have done that because, you know, if people don't feel like we have the potential for losing a congressional seat in Pennsylvania because of losing population compared to other states. But the census, you know, is so important because it not only establishes how many congressional seats you have, but also the money that comes into the state is based on population. And so it's so important for people to complete their census forms and get them in. It helps. I mean, I'm sure your county is pushing that as much as my county is.
Yep.
And it's kind of one of those things, oh, that's a good thing to do while we're sitting around and need some, go find that census form.
That's right. And you do it online.
And do it online.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I do see that we have a couple people on our Zoom call here, and I wanted to see if anybody had any questions. If you do, you can unmute yourself and ask away. David, I know you said you had a couple questions.
Yes, I do. Well, first, I want to express my appreciation to the General Assembly for pulling together and getting the voting reforms passed this past year. But it was very timely that we now have the opportunity to vote by mail. Mm-hmm. And that's really one of the topics that I'm concerned about. You'd mentioned that it's not really practicable to do a mailing to everybody just for the costs involved with getting a ballot or even an application for the ballot to everyone. But I'm wondering, well, I mean, I think that the value of our elections and the democratic process is a pretty high priority and should be at the top of people's priority list when it comes to budgeting. But I am concerned that there's going to be consolidation of polling places, which makes sense if there's an opportunity for everybody and everybody knows that there's an opportunity to vote by mail. But if not, how are we going to make sure everybody knows that your polling place might have changed? It seems to me that would be something that we would have to have a similar level of effort to make sure people are aware of that. And if we can do that, why can't we also do the voting by mail thing at the same time?
That's a great point. And while you were speaking, I was thinking, why couldn't we do this at the same time? The counties will be the ones that are sending the mail-in ballots out. And I mean, I think you're making a really good point, but I think that at this point, it may be like I would let your legislator and your county commissioners, like I would be in touch with them and ask that question of them. Because as that's raised, I mean, mail will have to be used. And I'm not trying to say that I think it's incredibly, our vote is so important. It was disappointing to not have the money allocated to put everybody, to send everybody the ballot. But I think that I would keep pushing on that one. I would keep pushing. I think if people keep pushing on it so that lawmakers, policymakers know that it's important.
Mhm.
I think that's always really a valuable thing to do.
Well, if I can add to the cost a little bit, it seems to me that with mail-in ballots, that it seems like a really little thing, but for some people, if that envelope has a prepaid postage on it, it's going to make a big difference, especially at a time when we're dealing with the pandemic. That if you can't get to the polls, well, I guess you can't get to the post office either. So if you're buying stamps, and so many people do their business over online, that they're not used to having stamps sitting around. And I don't know, is it going to take one first-class stamp to mail that ballot back, or is it going to be more? Or it makes it so much more difficult for people to be able to respond if there's not a postage paid stamp on that envelope.
I'm so glad that you raised that, because it makes me, I have no idea how much it would cost. And it almost seems, I mean, part of my head is going to, God, there ought to be a GoFundMe for that. But, it just makes you think that, how could we, like, instead of saying we can't do it,
Mm-hmm.
Right.
like, I think it would be better to say, how can we do it? And so thank you. I think that that's something to raise. I feel like contacting, I know that the county commissioners are in touch with the County Commissioners Association is a pretty good organization. And I think that contacting your county commissioners would be a good thing to do. I think that's where I'm going to start. And just see how open they are to different ideas on how to get this done. And then also the feasibility of pushing it at the state level.
Would that
I think both things can be done.
Would that be something to do directly with contacting the County Commissioners Association, as opposed to each, piecemeal talking to each county? Really can only talk to my county commissioners.
You know what? Why don't I call my county commissioner, and then I can let Patty know how that went, and she can get back in touch.
Okay.
Does that sound?
Sure.
Yeah. I'll because sometimes associations like that aren't equipped, because they're probably also working from home, and they may not be equipped to have an onslaught calls. That's why going through the county actually could help. But the counties, I think, because I don't know what's been done to say, how can we do that? Because look, I'm in a big county. We have over 800,000 residents. So, but that means there's also more revenue sources potentially. But I think that, I don't know, I really appreciate that, because it just made me think about it as like, well, I wonder how we could do that, because, other people are taking care of that. So you don't put a whole lot of bandwidth into it, but it's a really good question, David.
Yeah. Thank you.
Sure. One just little point or question. You'd mentioned about making sure when people do the vote by mail online.
Yeah.
PAvoters.com.
Yeah.
That they have the correct, that they have the correct, their name exactly as it would appear on their voter registration card. Well, I don't remember what I put, exactly how it read, when I registered 150 years ago. So I'm wondering if you go through, and there is an opportunity to check to make sure that you are currently registered.
Mm-hmm.
There is.
Would that not give you your exact
Yeah.
name, the way it's printed on your registration, and then you could use that to make sure it doesn't include your full middle name or your initial, or
Right.
Yeah, my recollection was that there was something on the application site that said something about putting things in the way it was on your driver's license. Now, my name on my driver's license is Mary Josephine Daley, and I can't remember, and I don't even remember how I filled it out, though I have it here. Yeah, I think that I'm registered to vote as Mary Jo Daley. And so I was just a slight bit worried. But with, so many people register at the same time that they're renewing their driver's license.
Yep.
That's another opportunity that I think that's why they used it. But there is a way to check your name. And if you go on, I believe the Department of State has a list of everybody, and there's a way to go in on the Department of State's website to check if you're registered.
Yep.
I would assume that it would be listed in the proper way, whatever way you're supposed to use on.
Oh yeah, it would have to be, because how else would they're not making up names?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but I think that one of the things we learned with the Real ID situation was how many people's driver's license doesn't exactly match, or they're when they have to get all that identification together, they run into problems with their middle name and their middle initial.
It's differently than your driver's license, and yeah.
Yeah.
Unbelievable how many different iterations of issues we saw. It was like, oh my gosh, and all of them had to be straightened out. Of course, there's we've got another year on that deadline, was moved a year in the future. So, and that's why I worried, because I'm on the ballot as Mary Jo Daley, but my legal name is Mary Josephine Daley. So I do run into this.
Yeah.
I even ran into it when I was doing my petitions this year.
You want to make sure you get those right.
Yes, fortunately. So I made a note for myself to talk to my county commissioner who oversees the voter services, and then I'll let Patty know what I find out.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any other questions before we close down? Going once. Well, thank you, Mary Jo. I really appreciate you spending your time with us. I know we went over, but I appreciate you being so, yeah, we did. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I appreciate you being so generous with your time, and for, like I said, continuing to work through this and doing everything that you're doing for all of us. You represent Montgomery, yeah, you represent Montgomery County, but you represent all of us, and I appreciate it.
I grew up in Royers Ford, so I'm a Montgomery County resident.
Excellent. That's nice to know. Royersford has a really great state representative now in Joe Cerisi.
Okay.
One of our, he just got elected. He's in his first term, and he's doing a great job for those folks.
Good. Good to hear.
Yeah.
Well, thank you both.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
And thanks for everybody joining us, and stay safe.
Absolutely.
All right. Have a good day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.